Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here for more in Hawaii, the state of clean energy, with Jim Alberts, who is the Senior Vice President of Customer Service at Hawaiian Electric Company. Title of our show is How the NextEra Deal is Affecting the Community, and he can tell us about that. And we have our co-host, Sharon Moriwaki and Ray Starling, to join us and make sure to keep me in control. And also Ray has brought his harmonica, which he has threatened to use against us at some point in the show. Maybe later on we can do that. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here.
It's good to be back.
This is, energy is so important. I think sometimes we forget that it is at the core of our economy and our society for that matter. And the Clean Energy Initiative, whenever it started and however far down the track it is, it's central to the future of the state, as no other thing is, not even rail. I'm only joking. So here we are in the middle of the biggest deal that ever happened in the state. And I'm not talking about since statehood. I'm talking about since Captain Cook, the biggest deal that ever happened. And we want to know how that is, how that is affecting people. We saw some of that today in the legislature because there was a committee hearing with four committees all meeting together. Wow. And, the chandeliers were overloaded with people hanging there.
Standing room only.
Standing room only. And then they had a monitor outside. And there was standing room outside, too. Hundreds of people that came. And I'm not sure why they came. I guess they came so they could see, what these four committees wanted to know about. Maybe they thought they could ask questions, too. I don't know if they got a chance.
No, it was right on the agenda. You couldn't ask questions.
Oh, okay. It was just the members of all these committees, which was, got a lot of people there, a lot of members of the committees, and a lot of questions that, came from every direction. And then a room was filled with people who were writing notes and all this. And I guess this was kind of a rollout, if you look at it. I don't know if, Eric Gleason has actually gone public in a Q&A session before, but he was certainly doing that today with Alan Oshima.
Yeah,
and they were very good, I mean, a couple of my reactions, Sharon, interested in your reaction. They were well prepared. They understood the stakes. Both of them had their eye on the ball. They were faced with questions that, that were hard. Some of them,
pretty pointed too, and they were
really
able to handle
questions. Those are hard when the questions.
But they were very calmly addressing the questions.
Right,
so
you
I
never saw any reaction. They were just the facts, And I really admired the two of them for being as prepared as they were, as cool as they were, and working together. If that's an example of how the companies are working together in this due diligence period, then good. So anyway, here we are, and it kind of reflects the public interest. I'm sure it'll be on the 6 o'clock news and the 10 o'clock news and the 3 in the morning news about what was said today. But if that is an example of the rollout, so to speak, and the putting this Q&A thing out in front of the public, I think that was pretty successful actually. And so the question is, how is the public being affected? How are your customers being affected, Jim? How is Hawaiian Electric being affected? So can we talk about that today?
We can talk briefly about it, but since you two were at the hearing today, you probably get better information than I have.
But you're the face of Hawaiian Electric in the community, so you're hearing a lot of feedback that perhaps the legislators, reflected when they were asking some of these questions on the impact of the customer and the employees and so forth. So
sure.
Maybe in terms of that kind of context, what you've heard and how you see that.
Sure. I mean, the goal of all mergers in our business are to have it in the best interest of customers. And if we focus on that and we align those goals, I think everybody wins. I think the combination of these two companies are a great match. Both are very strong, focused on renewable energy, and both have great aspirations for proving out technologies to make that happen quicker. So from a customer point of view, having been through several mergers in my lifetime in the past, the unique thing about utility mergers and acquisitions is they take a long time. There's a very transparent approval process, so there's a great opportunity for customers to gather information, but what you always hope for is that we focus on the facts. sometimes, things can get off the rails and people start to speculate about things that may or may not happen. But if we as a community all pull together and focus on the facts, that's important, because this is an important decision for our state and our community.
And I think they push the goal of affordability and really that, the community in mind, is important to kind of keep your eye on that prize too.
Yeah, it's critically important. And we started on a process, our transformation process, that focus on, lowering customer bills by 20% by 2030. And there are all kinds of facets with that, including LNG and renewables, in addition to other things. NextEra has looked at those plans, they endorse those plans. So I think there's a great continuity here in terms of philosophy and approach, in terms of customers. And the one thing we absolutely agree on is everything we do has to be in the best interest of customers.
It's interesting that something you said a minute ago made me think of it, is that we're in a time of consolidation. And that goes for the Comcast deal,
Yes.
as well in telecommunications, and it goes certainly for this deal, because utilities are consolidating all over the country. We would never be here unless we were part of that consolidation. I don't think people realize that this is no surprise. You said you had seen other mergers and acquisitions. It's been going on for a long time.
It has. In my 25-plus year career in the utility industry, I've been part of 6 different mergers and acquisitions in my life.
Wow.
And they all yield good results, as long as everybody stays focused on the facts and what's good for customers. And both of our companies have committed to that. So I think that's a great thing for our community.
Yeah. Well, okay. I mean, I think that's very important. That, in Hawaii, we're doing a program on it. I think they're doing a luncheon program on this subject in April, and it's called Managing Offshore Investment in Hawaii, and it goes to the money that's coming in on the Comcast deal. It goes to the investment that that in this case NextEra is making in Hawaiian Electric. It goes to lots of other developments, including, for example, Super Ferry, which didn't work out so well. And the notion is, in this program anyway, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on, is it's not so much that we treat it either as cargo cult, where if it comes from far away, it must be good, or we treat it as paranoia. If it comes from far away, we hate it, right? Knee jerk. It's a matter of managing it. It's a matter of making sure, and this was evident at today's hearing, making sure that everybody is on the same page, and that we all sort of agree that this is the way the investment should be, this is the way the public should see the investment, the way the investor should see the public.
And I think Jim brings up a good point, that it's really should be fact-based, because a lot of speculation, a lot of people don't know. So the more that you can have this public interaction as to what the facts really are, there's more trust developed in the community. I think a lot of it is the reaction of, oh, this is offshore, and we can't trust offshore. We want to make sure that you're taking care of Hawaii's people. And I think more information going out that's based on fact would be very helpful to moving it forward.
Yeah, well, I think today was, you'll hear more about it, I'm sure, but I think today was successful in that regard.
And my personal observation since I've moved to Hawaii is this is one of the most global states that we have in the entire country. So when I hear people talk about the differences between Hawaii and Florida, I think we're all members of the same nation, and that makes it really powerful that we have that diversity to be able to capitalize on the strengths of many people. So that's a tremendous plus for us.
Yeah, and the extra capital that would be invested, that would help the new technology costs money. A lot of people don't realize that. They think it comes out of the sky like cargo. and the kind of clout that NextEra brings would help us do that and do it more efficiently, perhaps. And so, there's all kinds of things where there are potential positives on all sides of this deal. And I think it's a matter of getting that in front of the public. So what kind of feedback are you getting, as a Senior Vice President for customer service?
Most of the feedback that I get is curiosity, since this really hasn't happened much and many people here haven't been exposed to it. Everybody's interested to learn. And that's where I think there's a real plus, getting back to the facts, is let's lay out the process so everybody understands what it is, what the timing of that is, how we work through it, where the decisions get made, how they get made, and just make it really obvious, transparent for everyone. But at this stage, it's really just curiosity. People have questions, and since we're early in this process, there's still a lot of answers that have to be defined, and we just need to work through those.
Yeah.
Like-
Go ahead.
And like I said before, this process in the utility business takes a while because of the approval process. So there's plenty of time to work through these issues. It's not gonna just happen overnight.
Roz Baker made a comment today, which is interesting. She was the chair of one of those 4 committees, I think environmental protection.
Yeah, I think consumer
Consumer
protection.
protection, sorry, I meant to say that. She said that she wanted to know the plans, and she was drilling down for all these details. And Eric Leeson said, we only announced this like 60 days ago.
Right.
We don't have all the details on the plans yet. And her response to that was, we're gonna wanna know them.
Right.
Somewhere along the line. We're gonna wanna know the details of the plan. I said, oh, wow, does that sound like the legislature or the PUC?
Well, in fact, you are filing. Is that tomorrow?
Yes, and I think the good news is that people want to know and they want to understand it, especially at the legislative level and the PUC level, because it comes back to this fact-based decision-making. The more you know, the better the decision. And as you work through that in the legislature and the PUC, everybody wins if we understand it well.
Yeah, so it's a matter of getting out and talking about it. And I can tell you, Jim, that we are dedicated to doing that.
Great,
Yeah.
excellent.
So
We'll
tell
bring-
us what
we'll bring
everybody.
more
Yeah,
people
we
here
should.
then.
We should have more people, and yeah, I think that would be great for the public to hear, because you say the facts and see where we are, and not have to speculate. I think that's where the problem comes in.
So
Yeah.
before the show began, Ray had a question I thought was
Well,
interesting.
I actually, some of the discussion here has led me to another question that I'd like to ask. What you had a full plate before the NextEra offer was made, and you started thinking about merger. And I'm wondering, as we go along, how are you working the priorities in terms of all the things that were already in the fire at when you first heard about the
Sure.
NextEra merger, and so there are people wondering, are some things going to kind of stop? Is it all going to go down the road together?
I think it goes-
Do you have to have a priority of things?
I think it goes
going
down the
forward?
road together. The good news is our transformation plan that Hawaiian Electric put out, we've reviewed carefully with NextEra, and NextEra supports those plans. So I think that's really good for our community continuity-wise. The plans they see on the table and the goals they see on the table today are the goals that we're going to continue to work on for the rest of this year. So I think we have really good alignment, company to company. Now, it's important to note that we're still separate companies until this deal goes through, but we do have good alignment and great cooperation.
You said you have NextEra people presence here now.
Well, they're in the community, but they're not on our site actively managing work, so
So you can touch bases. It's not like writing to Florida or emailing to Florida.
that's right. Yeah.
Well, to follow up on Ray's point, Ray's question, one of the things that came up last hour with Crystal Kua of First Wind was they feel that wind and also solar farms, large solar farms, require the undersea cable. Okay, and today at this 4-committee hearing, it was made clear that there were 2 views in the room.
Right.
Namely, Hawaiian Electric had made a study and thought that it might not be feasible. And then NextEra made a study and thought that it may be feasible. And what Eric said was that the jury is out on the decision. Okay, so somewhere along the line, I don't know when or where or how, First Wind and others are going to be looking for that decision because they got a plan, and they'll be really excited if they can, equalize the disparity between the markets and the resources on the various islands by using the undersea cable. You can probably tell where my inclination is. but putting that aside, I mean, how does this decision ultimately get made? Is it made now in the course of the review process? Is it made after? How do we address that kind of issue? It's an important issue.
It is. Well, I'll give you my personal view, because I think there are more broad contexts than my own personal view. It comes back to this fact-based process and what's good for customers. So if we carefully study the cable and it proves to be good and it's good for customers, then it should be done. And if we can achieve the same results at a lower cost with other options, then we owe it to ourselves to explore those too. So we got to work our way through that process and just make sure we understand all the nuances.
You will never have had as much of a goldfish bowl as you will this year. I mean, everybody wants to know everything about everything these days.
So what are you going to do for your customers?
Well, the goals we have for our customers are the same thing we have in our plans today. So our goal is to lower bills by 20% by 2030. We want to triple distributed generation solar, and we want to make sure to give customers more options in addition to that. So things like community solar for people who don't have access to rooftops. We want to make sure that everybody has options. And then as we get into looking at new things like our recent filing, we want to make sure that it's all done fairly and equitably, that some product lines aren't cost shifting to other customers when they shouldn't be. So we just want to make that transparent, and we want to have that dialogue.
We're going to take a short break, okay? This is Jim Alberts, Senior Vice President of Customer Service of Hawaiian Electric Company, here in Hawaii, the state of clean energy, with Sharon Moriwaki and Ray Starling and me, and we're talking about how the NextEra deal is affecting the community. We'll be right back after this very short break.
Aloha, I'm Kili'i Akina, president of the Grassroot Institute and host on Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii broadcast network. Ehana Kako means let's work together. Think of the sad alternative, let's not work together. Here in Hawaii, with all of our diversity and the richness of the people, it's important for us to come together around issues on the basis of what's right and what's good and what's going to serve the common good. And that's what we try to do at Ehana Kako. Every week we interview movers and shakers, people in government, business, and other sectors of society to talk about how to create together a better government, economy, a better world here in Hawaii that can bless the rest of the world. I thank you for your attention to ThinkTech Hawaii, and we look forward to seeing you every Monday, 2 to 3 p.m. on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. We're Ehana Kako, and we wish you well. Aloha.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here with Jim Alberts, Senior Vice President of Customer Service at Hawaiian Electric. We are happy to have him, honored to have him in the studio, with Sharon Moriwaki and Ray Starling and me, here in Hawaii, the state of clean energy, talking about how the NextEra deal is affecting the community. So to continue that thought, Ray, you had a question about...
Yeah. Well, you know, I was wondering, having worked at Hawaiian Electric before and consider myself a Hawaiian,
graduate.
Hawaiian Electric, yeah, alumni. How do you see, and I know there are lots of variables, but how do you see the company looking, you know, 2 years, 3 years down the road in terms of a lot of people from Florida here, 10% from Florida, you know, do you see a lot of movement there, or is it just really going to be the merger will bring about a different management level structure that you know, it may still have Hawaiian Electric people in the management function, but what do you see? Is it 10%?
Sure.
New guys, 40%?
I hate to speculate.
I realize it's speculation, but a lot of people are interested.
I'll give you my personal perspective again, not a company position. I think it's a good thing for people to move around and gain new insights and learn about diversity. I think it makes a company stronger, even internally within Hawaiian Electric, being able to rotate people between functions and jobs so they see the other perspectives and they understand those, makes them better decision makers. And you know, one of the most fun things in the world is when we take people and we bring them into the call center and we have them sit down and listen to calls for a day. to really get a feel for what's on customers'
Calls
minds.
from customers.
Yeah, I mean, it really shapes
Complaints.
people's views. So I think at the end of the day, I mean, we'll be organized efficiently, we'll be organized that serve customers well. But speculating beyond that, I couldn't say how many people, and I couldn't say when that would happen. Now, as part of the deal structure, there's a 2-year wait period. And I think that's a great thing because to me it says that NextEra wants to come in and learn more about Hawaii and about the people here and about how business is done in Hawaii before big decisions are made. And I think that's great insight from their perspective to be able to acknowledge that it is different from where they've been in the past and they want to learn before those decisions get made.
Yeah, although there was a certain, that question was posed today. I don't remember exactly what Eric Gleason's answer was. I think he really didn't have enough information to answer it, aside from the 2-year hiatus.
And I think Alan was saying even internally, over a 3-year period, you're going to have changes within the company anyway. So I think it was, leaving it open to how it pans out over time.
Yeah, there's a certain vein of, we got to keep this thing local. I heard that among some of the members of the committee. But at the end of the day, it has to be in the best interests of the community, no matter what.
Absolutely.
And I always like to say, it's just our utility. And I mean that affectionately. It's our utility. It's kept us lit for 100 years.
It really is. I mean, it's a symbiotic relationship, a utility, gas or electric, or telephone, water, sewer, all serves the community. And if the community does well, businesses do well, and we all thrive together. So I think it's really important that this is studied carefully and it's set up for success.
Yeah. And if you have a big player who has the keys for success, then all you have to do is make sure that he understands the local situation and that conditions, if any, are reasonable. They're not going to blow the deal up. I think I'm very concerned that some people will want to impose conditions that are very hard for any utility to live with, and we have to resist that. I think at the end of the day, this should be a negotiated arrangement. There has to be a bunch of stakeholders in a room that sit down and put their reasonable caps on and cut a deal on any conditions so that it's not, intolerable, that it doesn't bust the deal up.
Sounds like a great plan.
Yeah, I mean, do it right here. We got enough room.
Right on television.
So tell us what else you're doing, Jim. Tell us more. What's happening?
Anyway, wait, let's talk about the interconnect initiative that
interconnect.
you're working on. That's the primary thing.
Sure. As everybody knows, Hawaiian Electric companies made a filing in regard to changing how we look at rooftop renewables and distributed generation. Now, a couple of key points. We see this as a growth opportunity because we know that customers are very interested in rooftop PV and other distributed generation, including storage. So we want to make that more accessible. So our proposal takes the circuit limits from 120% daytime minimum load to 250%. And that will create lots of capacity for people to purchase systems and install them in their homes. We really want to start to learn new things. So we've got some innovative solutions where we're going to look at non-export systems and smart export. And all we mean by that is a system that's connected to a battery and that it's connected to the grid so it can interact with the grid and that it can provide support for the grid and makes it a winner. The third leg of that stool is we want to invite the solar industry in to help us prioritize upgrades on our circuits. So collectively as a whole, we want to start to think about this from many different views, and I think that'll lead to a good outcome. The last part of that program, the biggest part of the program, is addressing fairness, because today, if you go back to 2013, $38 million of cost shifting took place from customers who have PV to those who don't. And in 2014, that went up to $53 million. And this will continue to grow unless we remedy that. So what we proposed is a holistic, comprehensive program packaged together to address all these issues. We want to have growth, but we want to do it fairly. Now, it lowers the net export rate for customers. Instead of the retail rate, we propose a rate that looks at the actual cost of, that's closer to that cost of generating at the PV system. So an example would be on Oahu today, retail rate is 29 cents, and the net export rate would be about 15 cents. Now, it's hard to describe all the variables, but as we look at the numbers, we think that takes a typical system investment for a residential customer from about a 5-year payback to a 9-year payback. Still a really good investment, and it helps us partially take care of this cost shifting problem, fairness for everybody.
You get resistance on that
Yeah,
from the people who give the spreadsheets out to the customers who like to tell them it's 5 years.
Well, we do, but one of the big facts here is that we're grandfathering. Our recommendation is to grandfather. Everything I say here is subject to the PUC approval process, so this is just our filing. We propose that all people who have net energy metering agreements today are grandfathered under their current deal, so their deal doesn't change.
Is that forever?
Good question.
We'll see. I mean, forever's a long time. The people who are in the queue with an application would be grandfathered under the current program.
Wow.
Because in the future, one way I can address that forever question is, what happens if 10 years from now we have a new technology breakthrough and something better happens? Wouldn't you want to have the option to be able to take the better deal? So I think giving customers those choices is important. So if you're in the queue, you're also grandfathered. And we didn't want this to surprise people, so we created a little bit of a buffer. We asked for a 60-day approval process and a buffer of megawatts for customers to apply so that it's not an instant shock. There's a bit of a lead here, so people can still apply, get into the current net energy metering program. But our recommendation is to move to something that's more fair and equitable. And if you think about this in a sustainable way, if you really want to grow something, you got to make sure it's priced right and priced fairly. And we believe that's what we've done in this instance, is put forth a growth program that prices fairly, treats customers fairly, and really leverages the technology. And that was one of the big breakthroughs for us, as we sought out and worked with the industry on collaboration for testing. So in a partnership with NRail, Solar City, EPRI, and us, and many inverter manufacturers, went about testing to see what the capabilities of the inverters are. And we found that they have great capabilities. And that's what gives us confidence to be able to raise this threshold limit on the circuits.
I'd be worried about the marketplace from the point of view of the installers and the next generation of customers. Because the ones now are protected. I mean, the ones who are in the pipeline or have it are protected. So, and now under the new arrangement, you only get paid 15 cents per kilowatt hour, and that's like half of what you would be paid under the old arrangement. So it's less attractive. It's the 9-year payoff instead of the 5 and all that. So I may not, and Lord knows, we have had a serious decline in the number of PV installations, rooftop installations in the past couple of years. It's gone down to really a fraction of it. I mean, the numbers are pretty clear. So query, am I going to be inclined, I'm certainly not going to be as inclined as I was before, but am I going to be inclined to do PV if I'm only getting half of the retail rate back on the energy I sell? And if my spreadsheet is 9 years instead of 5 and so forth, maybe I'm not going to do it. Maybe I'm going to enjoy my PV through the solar farm approach, which I personally like. So if I don't do that, then this doesn't really carry on for a lot of people. Am I right?
Well, I think what we'll find is that customers will still want this option. I do. And if we think beyond just the question of how much generation I can have, but how much do you need? And this gets to where Ray lives in energy efficiency. We've got to think beyond just the generation side of this. So energy efficiency is a big part of it. We're looking at new innovations with products and services around demand response, community solar option, and how do we really create this interactive grid? So think of a future where we have smart meters and a smart grid, and we deploy time of use rates. We can send the right price signals And some of the discussions that we're having here today that are so focused on just one issue of distributed generation have to all become considered part of a notion of distributed energy resources. Because today, storage can play a great win for a community and a customer, even without PV. And I'll give you a good example.
Wait, hold the example.
Okay.
We're going to have a break.
Okay.
I can feel it coming.
Don't forget, I want to know the
Okay,
example.
I mean, in fact, I wanted to ask you that very question.
All right.
Jim Alberts, Senior Vice President of Customer Service at Hawaiian Electric here in the state of clean energy with Sharon Moriwaki and Ray Starling and me, asking how the NextEra deal is affecting the community. And I suppose that thread still continues in our discussion. We'll be right back when we're going to talk about storage.
Aloha, I'm Hunter Hevlin, host of Sustainable Hawaii here at ThinkTech Hawaii. You can tune in every week on Thursday at 2 p.m. to see interviews with sustainability professionals from around the state and even further abroad, learning about activities with water management, food security, waste management, and a whole host of other fascinating opportunities to get engaged with making a greener island. So if you're interested in making the transition from consuming individuals to communities of producers, check us out every Thursday.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here with Jim Alberts, Senior Vice President of Customer Service at Hawaiian Electric, with Sharon Moriwaki and Ray Starling and me for the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum here in Hawaii, the state of clean energy. So as we left it, the cliffhanger, so to say, before the break, was storage. You know, we heard from Crystal Kua that that these new farms are being built without a requirement that the developer provide batteries storage. And so that because, as she expressed it, it's at a higher level of voltage, and it's in a different place in the grid than the circuits for the rooftop solar. And you don't have the same concerns about interconnection when you're talking about that place, in higher place in the voltage and so forth. So, what we're having here is an increased amount of rooftop, I mean, ideally, and a dramatically increased amount of solar farms, hundreds of megawatts more coming on. So what about storage? How can we do the nighttime thing?
Sure. Well, storage can play many roles, and today we've got an example of a company in the Energy Accelerator program called STEM, and they're going out talking to commercial customers, trying to help offset their demand charges. So even though they may not involve a PV system, it allows that storage to create a buffer to reduce demand, which is a win for everybody because it means we don't have to build out bigger, more robust systems, and it helps lower their bills. Now, in regard to your question about the big systems, it's true on the higher voltage, it's easier to manage, and usually it's the future looking at us because these systems are highly interconnected, they have the right controls on them, and they're an interactive part of the grid. And that's where we need to transform rooftop PV to make total advantage and really push renewables to the limit. It has to be part of an interactive grid. So making the right connections and the right controls with those systems, and possibly installing batteries on the customer side of the meter.
Customer side.
On the customer side of the meter can play an advantage. And a perfect scenario there would be when you have to make a choice between doing a circuit upgrade when maybe local storage could solve the same problem, and local storage is more economical for the customers. So looking at it from the customer point of view, and I'll keep coming back to that, if we look at it from the customer point of view, you always choose the right option. Now, we'll have to have some grid-side storage as well to regulate frequency on the grid so that customers can be accustomed to, their clocks running at the right speed. And being able to manage the grid effectively and respond to things that are really, really fast. Now, the load shifting part of this question for battery storage is yet to come because load shifting is more difficult.
That's the midnight thing.
Yes.
After.
So you were saying 50,000 customers though are net metered in. So-
51,000 customers across the company.
So is that a problem with HECO trying to manage that when you've got individual rooftops versus the utility scale, and how is that being done?
Well, we're successfully managing that today. 51,000 customers on net energy metering. Last year alone, we approved 11,000 new applications for interconnection. So this current program is moving aggressively. But part of our future filing, where we ask for this change to move to the transitional program, would allow us to interact with those systems. The current systems, as we interpret it, we're not allowed to put controls on those systems and interact with them. So we need a new program that allows us to do that, and we think that can be a big advantage, because it could allow us, when we interact, to maybe move some systems up and down minimally, and in the case of emergencies especially, to be able to take immediate action to prevent widespread outages.
Yeah, it's really important. But one part of this program is that you take 125% of the system capacity, is it, or what's the 125% of what?
Well, the 120% of the daytime minimum load.
The minimum load, you double that.
And we've
or
doubled
to
it.
250.
That's right.
So is there risk attached to that?
There-
I mean, could that bring the thing down?
Well, there is some risk, but the review process that we go through when we receive an application, we do a technical review, a supplemental review, and then if there are still issues, it could involve further studies. But this collaborative work we did with the industry, NRail, EPRI, Solar City, we looked at how inverters can help solve many of those problems. So in particular, the transient overvoltage issue, and all those are our big voltage spikes. And the inverters can trip fast enough to protect homes from those. Now, as we push the limits further and further, we're going to encounter new and different issues, which are going to take new solutions. And since we're the first to hit many of these limits, we have to work together. And that's one thing I can't stress enough for all of us, is how do we work collaboratively together for these solutions? Because if we each take our own paths and we charge down a litigious process, it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of energy.
Right,
And
distracting.
money.
And a lot of money.
Yeah.
So we need to work together to find these solutions and work for the customers, because that's who we're all here for.
What you said, I think, was really interesting to me about who has the burden of providing storage. And I thought for a time, well, this would be a burden that the homeowner would have to take with a rooftop solar, because he was there, and if he elected to do this and get into the whole net energy metering arrangement, then it's only logical that he pay for the cost of that storage for himself, because it serves only him. But then, people have argued that no, we especially with large facilities, we need storage on the utility side. In fact, we should have storage all through the system, that whatever comes into the system should be held in some sort of storage capacity until we're ready to use it at midnight. But what I heard you say is it's really both sides.
It is both sides.
And that's really good.
And if we look around the world, there are many places that have done some innovative projects. And I'll give you an example is New Zealand. They actually took storage on the customer side, and the utility owns that storage, but the utility controls it, it manages it and operates it. Because it was pretty early on, and the customers may not have been certain about what storage means for them, or what the risk is, or how you recycle, or where you take your battery when it doesn't work, or who you call when it doesn't work. And the utility invested in that behind the customer. And it comes back to this notion of it might be cheaper, if you look at it that way, than upgrading the circuits and things like transformers and reconductoring wiring. It might be a more economic decision, and it gives customers more flexibility.
So when you're dealing with, go back to the original question about NextEra. NextEra has capacity, and it has capital, and it has expertise that could be very useful in refining these initiatives and these systems as we go forward. I mean, the systems on your desk could benefit by what they bring to the table. Am I right?
Absolutely. They have a lot of expertise. Their non-regulated arm of their company operates in 26 states and Canada, and that's what they do for a living. They really are great at engineering expertise. Now, we have some great engineers at Hawaiian Electric too, because look at where we're at. We're at 20 times the national average for PV here in Hawaii. So that means we've got some great talent here in Hawaii too. So looking at the combination of the two, where NextEra is really good at maybe larger systems, Hawaiian Electric really good at distributed generation. The combination of those two things is pretty powerful.
One last question from me, and then I'm going to turn it over for either the harmonica or a summary from Ray Starling. People have said that NextEra comes in, and they are going to be more like a monopoly, because they want to control all going forward, all the sources of power, and that will make them more like a monopoly. And as a result, inevitably, we the customers that you are talking about, will wind up paying more, not less. I don't necessarily accept that myself, but I'm reporting to you what I've heard from other people. And I wonder if you can respond to that.
Sure.
Will we wind up paying more in this deal?
I don't believe we will. I think NextEra looks at our plans and believes that in pursuit of reducing bills by 20% by 2030, with their expertise and their influence and balance sheet can make it happen faster. So the combination of those two things really helps customers quicker.
Okay. Do you have any requests for a particular song?
Wait, I have a question.
Sorry.
Wait, one more question.
Sure.
We really didn't get around to talking about the community farms, the community solar. And what would that be, and how does that work? Because that is like utility scale, but it's the community benefits from it, right?
Right. And generally, when people think of large utility scale projects, they're very large. Community solar projects may be smaller, and it could be a group of customers that kind of hooey together and put a small system together and have an ownership interest
It's the microgrid.
in the power that comes from that system.
Yeah.
So they come in and apply to HECO, or how does that
So
work?
one person could organize it. We could possibly do it. We're looking at all those options, but we really need to make sure we move quickly on this. And that's why I think we have to look at all the options, whether we own it or somebody else owns it. We can't afford to take the time anymore to just study this and overanalyze it. We've got to come out with better options. And if we do this one right, everybody who lives in an apartment, who lives in a condo, or even has a roof that they don't want to put PV on, can choose this option. And it really works great because it shows up as a financial offset on your bill, and you don't have to worry about the maintenance or the headaches or the holes on your roof or the wind blowing things away.
So you would have a utility farm, and then you would just pay down from that bill for your electrics.
Yep, you would take an interest in the power that gets produced from that system, and then that would show up as an offset on your bill.
It's like an investment.
It really is.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Gee,
Well,
that's interesting.
Yeah, so
It's
so
just
when are you
another-
coming up with your, when is this program starting?
Well, we're pursuing it as rapidly as we can. I mean, we want to make sure and do it right. There are lots of different models out there, and we've looked at all those, and we've got a great team working on this nearly full time to get this to the market as quickly as we can.
Okay,
And we think it presents some good options for customers, in addition to the non-export, smart export, because when we really reach those high levels of penetration, these non-export, smart export systems are going to allow us to still give customers options, even though that circuit might be really highly penetrated.
Especially in Hawaii, where you've got a lot of renters and condo owners and not, single-family dwellings that they can put rooftop on.
Especially in
Yes.
Oahu.
And then the bigger picture, if we roll back from distributed generation, fuel makes up 50% or more of a customer's bill. So our proposal to bring LNG to Hawaii is an important step, because that cost of fuel would come down and be more stable and predictable over time. So lowering that part of the bill, giving customers more options, giving them more control, and putting greater choices in their hands is what we're all about. We're no longer in the business of selling kilowatt hours, we're in the services business.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Next time you come down, let's talk about LNG.
I might bring some other people along to talk
Sure.
about
That'd be
LNG.
good, yeah.
We've got some
Our
great
door is always
experts.
open.
We got some great experts that could do that. Sure.
So I didn't get the
Harmonica.
answer to my last question, my previous question. Is there any particular song?
Oh,
Ray will play anything for you.
Okay, it's up to you right now. You have a choice.
But you have to hum it. You have to hum it first.
I think definitely.
I'll be kind to you, Ray. I'll be kind to you.
We're going to definitely have to have Jim back because there's so many issues that people are really interested in hearing. And we understand that it's still sort of new and beginning to gel now, but there are just a lot of questions that we'd like to hear your thoughts on.
Sure.
And so, but I think you're on the right track when you say, and I think the company's taking a good position in saying the key to everything is doing what's in the best interest of the customer.
That's right.
Because if you take care of your customers, you know, they're going to stick with you, and that's critical going forward. So I'm glad to hear that that's top of the list. So we're gonna keep reminding you that that's where we need to go.
Yeah, it's number one.
Because I think it's good for this. It's the best thing for the state too.
It really is. Number one, take care of customers.
Very good.
We could be in the best of times coming soon.
Exciting
So
times,
we
that's
could-
for sure.
Exciting anyway.
I thought you were going to break into song there, and Ray would have to actually do background
We
music.
have to rehearse first. Okay, that's Jim Alberts, Senior Vice President of Customer Service at Hawaiian Electric. Here in Hawaii, the state of clean energy with Sharon Moriwaki, Ray Starling, and me. And we have talked about how the NextEra deal is affecting the community. It's a conversation that's just beginning. We'll have to do some more. Thank you so much.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Appreciate being here.
Aloha.